Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping right into the final, high-stakes battle for the U.S. Constitution, looking through the eyes of Alexander Hamilton in Federalist Papers 81 through 85.
So here's our game plan. We'll start with the context of this final push for ratification. Then we're going to tackle the three biggest fears that were threatening to sink the whole thing, and we'll wrap up with Hamilton's incredible closing argument.
Okay, picture this. It's 1788. The new Constitution has some very powerful enemies, and their last-ditch arguments could actually bring the whole American project crashing down before it even gets off the ground.
Now, this debate had been raging for months, but with a make-or-break vote coming up in New York, Alexander Hamilton, writing under the name Publius, steps into the ring one last time to counter this final wave of attacks.
So, what's the first major hurdle? Well, the anti-federalists were whipping up a massive fear, this idea that a new Supreme Court would become this unstoppable monster, just steamrolling the states and maybe even Congress itself.
And here's what they were really worried about. The critics were sounding the alarm that the court's power to interpret the spirit of the Constitution, not just the exact words, would basically make the judges more powerful than the people who actually write the laws.
But Hamilton's comeback to this is honestly brilliant in its simplicity. He says the judiciary is, by its very nature, the weakest branch. It can't command an army, that's the sword, and it doesn't control any money, the purse. So, if it makes a ruling, it has literally no power to enforce it.
He just dismisses the whole thing as a phantom, a ghost story. And why? Because Congress holds the ultimate trump card, the power of impeachment. He argues this is a complete security against any court getting too big for its britches.
And to calm everyone's nerves about the states becoming irrelevant, Hamilton introduces this idea of concurrent jurisdiction. He's basically saying, hey, don't worry, the state courts aren't going anywhere. They'll keep their powers and act as natural auxiliaries to federal law, sharing the judicial load.
Now, this next objection, this was a real gut punch argument. It was emotional, it was powerful, and it really got the public fired up. The claim that the Constitution secretly gets rid of the right to a trial by jury in civil cases.
And you got to admit, it's a pretty clever line of attack, right? They said, since the Constitution only mentions jury trials for criminal cases, that must mean it's canceling them for all other cases. It's a tricky argument, but as Hamilton's about to show, it's also deeply misleading.
Hamilton's response is just pure logic. He says, look, there is a world of difference between a document not mentioning something and that same document actively banning it. Silence does not equal abolition. They are not the same thing.
So why was the Constitution silent on this? Well, because the states themselves were, frankly, a total mess. Their legal systems were all over the place. New York had courts that didn't use juries for certain cases, while Georgia used juries for pretty much everything. Trying to write one single rule for everyone was just impossible.
So, at the end of the day, Hamilton's point is this. Leaving it up to Congress wasn't some dark conspiracy against juries. It was the only sensible, practical solution to a problem that the states themselves had created. All right, now we get to the big one. The most famous and maybe the most powerful argument of them all. The new Constitution didn't have a Bill of Rights. And for a lot of people, that was terrifying. It made them feel completely exposed to government power. For so many people, this was the deal breaker. A constitution without a list of rights? It looked like a glaring, intentional omission. And to them, it was proof that the Federalists were secretly planning to create a tyranny. But then, Hamilton does something amazing. He completely flips the argument on its head with this one simple question. He argues that for this new kind of limited government, a Bill of Rights wasn't just unnecessary, it could actually be dangerous. He's like, wait a minute, have you guys actually read the document? He points out all these specific protections that are already baked right into the Constitution. Things like habeas corpus, so the government can't just lock you up and throw away the key, or the ban on ex post facto laws. These are huge protections for liberty.
So for Hamilton, the main idea was this. The entire document was the Bill of Rights. By carefully listing what the government could do, it automatically prohibited it from doing anything else. That, he argued, was the ultimate protection. So after all the back and forth, all the technical debates, Hamilton changes his tone in his final essay. He stops playing defense and instead makes this passionate, common-sense closing argument directly to the people. He basically says, look, let's be realistic. We're all human here. He urges them to give up this fantasy of a perfect plan, reminding them that the Constitution was the best possible compromise they could hope to achieve.
The opposition was demanding that they fix all the problems before signing, but Hamilton argued that was a recipe for total failure. It would mean starting over from scratch, which would never work. His proposal was way more practical. Ratify it now and then use the amendment process that's already in the Constitution to fix it later.
And that number right there, 9, that was the key to his whole argument. The system for amending the Constitution was designed to actually be possible. It only took 9 states to kickstart the process, which was a much, much lower bar than getting all 13 to agree on a whole new document. And really, Hamilton's final argument pushes us to ask a question that's just as relevant today as it was in 1788. In the messy business of politics and progress, how do you know when to stop chasing perfection and accept that good enough is what you need to move forward?